Oil and gas methane emissions are a big problem. Most of you will know that methane is a much more potent gas in the short term, say about 20, 25 years, than CO2, 85 times more damaging and dangerous. And cutting down on oil and gas, methane emissions from the oil and gas sector is a big problem. So I'm going to talk to Jan Gorski, who is the director of the Pembina Institute's oil and gas program, about a case study out of Peace River region in Alberta, where they actually have had some success. So welcome to the interview, Jan.
Thanks, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Now, this has been a problem for a long time. There are all sorts of related issues, like actually measuring methane emissions so we know how much there is there. There are odor issues, on and on. But starting in 2014, the Alberta government cracked down on natural gas releases, methane emissions from natural gas production, and has been wildly successful. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really great success story here in Alberta on methane that deserves to get a bit more attention. So a little bit of background on what's happening here. So the Peace River region in northwestern Alberta, primarily oil production, heavy oil. So it's similar to oil sands, but produced in a different way. And when it's produced, there's a lot of gas that comes up with it. And typically producers in this area and elsewhere in Alberta and Saskatchewan, there's still a good chunk of this gas that just gets vented, released into the atmosphere. In Peace River, this was causing particular issues because it's sour gas. So it has hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic and smells bad. And so there were complaints in the community of odors. And so the regulator put in rules that started to come into force in 2014 and ramped up to 2018, really with the intention of addressing these odor issues. But the side effect of this, because methane is the main component of natural gas, is that it also really nearly eliminated methane emissions. So a couple of big things that were done. No routine venting was allowed. So you basically weren't allowed to release any of the gas that comes up with the oil. And then companies also had to do other things like very frequent monthly leak detection repair at high-risk sources. And what we saw is methane emissions really came down drastically during this period.
Yeah, I've seen studies that show that 50% of methane emissions out of an oil and gas battery are from just broken valves and vents, equipment that's due for maintenance. It's broken down, stuff that companies should be fixing anyway, and just didn't get around to it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, some of it is things that malfunction, but a lot of it is venting, which is gas that companies known and willingly release because they don't feel that it's in their interest to actually conserve it.
Now, in terms of the venting and the flaring, so did they stop venting, or are they now flaring that gas instead of just releasing it into the atmosphere?
So they had to stop venting it. It's not clear exactly whether they, some producers likely conserved it, some flared it. Our analysis didn't go into the detail to figure out how much of it was conserved, how much of it was flared. Yeah.
So I guess your argument here is that as the federal government thinks about how it can lower oil and gas emissions, it's going to put on an oil and gas emission cap sometime in later this year or in 2023. And I know I've interviewed you about this before. Pembina argues that methane emissions are the low-hanging fruit, and it should raise its ambitions in that area. And I guess this would be a case study on why your proposal makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So the federal government is committed to put a cap on oil and gas emissions. They're also working on developing a set of methane regulations to achieve more reductions from methane. And I think this is a really important case study because it shows that we can implement strict rules that really get us close to eliminating methane without having an impact on production. And that's a really important piece here, in that what we saw, we looked at the production levels within the Peace River region in this type of oil production, and also in the rest of Alberta. And what we found was that oil production declined at a pretty similar rate inside Peace River and outside, which shows that companies didn't, they didn't pick up their business and say, well, this is too stringent for us, we're going to go elsewhere. They actually decided, you know what, these rules are something that we can comply with, so we're going to continue producing. And this shows that we can put in these kinds of rules to address methane. We can get close to eliminating routine venting, and we can put very strong leak detection and repair requirements on there.
What about the argument that this is in the producer's self-interest because now they're not venting or maybe they're not flaring natural gas, and every cubic meter of natural gas that gets saved is a cubic meter that you can sell to a customer?
Certainly, right now, especially with really high prices we're seeing for gas, it makes a lot of sense to save that gas, conserve it, and sell it, because, as you said, it's a product. It's not a waste. It's actually a valuable product.
Well, Jan, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Markham.